Okay. Last thing we were learning and discussing was what's called malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa. Malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa means, so you do something forbidden on Shabbos, but it's not done for the same purpose it was done in the Mishkan. So we gave a few examples. For instance, if somebody is extinguishing a fire, so the time of the Mishkan, the reason why they lit fires and they extinguished them was because they wanted coal. They wanted the coals. So then they would extinguish the fire to have the coal. What happens if somebody extinguishes a fire because they want somebody to sleep, and the fire is disturbing them, or they're cheap on the oil, they want to save oil. So then that's called malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa. Or we said another example, there's a dead body, God forbid, in a room. And normally the purpose of carrying is to take something from here because I want it there. The purpose of carrying on Shabbos normally is I want the thing in the new place I'm taking it to. But what happens if you have a dead body in the house? So then the reason why you don't want it here is not because you want the dead body there. The reason you're taking it out because you don't want it here. That would be classic examples of malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa. Now, what's the halacha malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa? So, in the Gemara, there's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's chayiv, mamish biblically forbidden. Rabbi Shimon holds it's rabbinically forbidden. It's still forbidden, but rabbinically. And like we learned before the whole time, that today there's no difference rabbinically and biblically. It's forbidden, period. What's interesting, the Rambam is one of the very few. The Rambam rules, like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's chayiv, but most of the Shainim, and that's the way we paskin, that like Rabbi Shimon, that it's only aser midrabanan. Now there's another thing that's called misasik. Okay, so we learned shaygig. We discussed already in the past. Shaygig, accidentally on Shabbos, means I know what I'm doing, but I think I'm allowed to do it. For instance, I forgot it was Shabbos, and I turned on the light. I knew what I was doing. I turned on the light, but I thought it was allowed because I didn't think it was Shabbos. Or I know it's Shabbos, but I didn't know you're not allowed to turn on the light. So I turned on the light. So in those cases, that's called shaygig, that you have to bring a korban chatas. Okay? What are the korban chatas? Sin offering. Or the third case we said, it says in Shchnarach, that what happens if you ask a shayla by a Rav, and the Rav said you're allowed to do it on Shabbos, but he was wrong, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. So that's also called accidental, because again, you knew what you were doing, but because the Rav said you're allowed to do it, you thought that you're allowed to do it. So then you have to bring a korban chatas. Now there's something called misasik. So misasik, until now, we discussed, you're leaning against the wall, and by mistake the light goes on. You didn't think, you're walking in the street and you kill a bug. That's called misasik. But there's another concept called misasik like this. What happens, you're not allowed to rip something out of the grass on Shabbos, out of the ground on Shabbos. It's the malacha of kaitzer, it's harvesting. If something's cut already, and I just want to pick it up off the ground, there's nothing wrong with it, it's already cut. There's nothing wrong picking something up off the ground. What happens, I wanted to pick up something that was already cut from the ground. And by mistake, I picked up something that was still connected to the ground. That's also misasik. Again, misasik means I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I was doing something wrong. I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to pick up if it was already cut from the ground, and by mistake, I picked up something that was connected to the ground. And there's a lot of similar cases like that. So then in that case, it would only be rabbinically forbidden. Okay. Or I did it a different way. Now there's another very important din when it comes to Shabbos. And that's called davar she'eina, what? Davar she'eina miskaven. Something unintentional. I don't want to do it. I'm not intending to do it, but it happens. To give you an example, the example we gave last time, I want to speak practical things, not about farming. You're not allowed to cause, we learned this last time, you're not allowed to cause bleeding in Shabbos. You're not allowed to make a wound on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make bleeding in Shabbos. It's an offshoot of the malacha of shechita, of shechting, you're causing blood. So you're not allowed to cause bleeding in Shabbos. What happens if somebody wants to floss their teeth? They want to floss their teeth, they don't want the teeth to bleed. Okay? That would be called Einem Miskaven. But, I must say right away, there's a very important detail in Einem Miskaven. Einem Miskaven means it's unintentional. I don't want it to happen. But if it's for sure going to happen, I'll give you a lot of examples in a second. So then, it's called psik reisha. Psik reisha we learned means you chop off the head, and I don't want the animal to die. I mean, it's crazy. If I chop off the head, of course it's going to die. You can't say I don't want the animal to die, because that's the expression in the Gemara. Psik reisha v'lo yomas. I'm going to chop off the head, but I don't want it to die. I mean, that's ridiculous, because it's for sure going to die. So therefore, Einem Miskaven, which is by the way in the Gemara also machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's asim with Rabbanon. Rabbi Shimon holds it's mutter. Again, we paskin like Rabbi Shimon that it's allowed to. But Rabbi Shimon agrees that if it's psik reisha, meaning it's inevitable going to happen, then it's called kavana. You can't say, I want to chop off the head of the chicken, but I don't want to kill it. I mean, you can't say that. It's for sure going to happen. That means I know it's going to happen. I'm intending it for it to happen. So I'll give you an example. The example the Gemara gives is you're not allowed to plow. Plowing means you're not allowed to make holes in the ground. Yeah, you know, that's plowing. You're making holes in the ground. I want to schlep a heavy table on the ground. So if it's a very heavy, but I don't want to make a hole. I just want to schlep it. So the din is, if I don't intend to, I'm allowed to schlep the table. But the halacha is if it's a very heavy table, that's for sure going to make a hole in the ground, then I can't do it. I can't do it because it's for sure going to happen. I can't say I don't want to make a hole in the ground. It's for sure going to make it happen. So therefore, for instance, in the practical case of flossing your teeth, bottom line, if your teeth always bleed, if they always bleed when you floss them, then you're not allowed to floss on Shabbos because you're causing bleeding. You don't want it, you just want to clean your teeth. You don't want to cause bleeding. Tough luck. I mean, the bottom line is that it's gonna happen for sure. If your teeth sometimes bleed, sometimes don't bleed, so then you would be allowed to floss your teeth on Shabbos. But there's another din involved. You're not allowed to cut things to size on Shabbos, so you can't cut dental floss on Shabbos. What you could do is either have pre-cut dental floss before Shabbos, or if you have your own dental floss, you just roll it out, pull it out, you don't rip it, and then you floss your teeth and you leave it until after Shabbos.
And if you don't measure it and cut it?
No, that's called measuring. Can't cut aluminum foil, take a piece of aluminum. You're not allowed to do all those things. Now, I'll give you another example which is very practical. Somebody has a refrigerator that has a light on. Okay? So I open the refrigerator door, but I don't want the light to go on. I don't want the light to go on because it's Shabbos. I don't want the light to go on. But the answer is, every time you open the refrigerator door, the light for sure is going to go on. Okay? So then you can't say, I don't want the light to go on. It's a psik reisha, as it's called. So therefore, psik reisha is like kavana. You can't say it's no kavana, it's like kavana. That means I intentionally turned on the light in the refrigerator. So you wouldn't be allowed to do that.
What if the fridge light is a little bit broken? So at times it does turn on and sometimes it doesn't.
So then technically, if it's not always going to go on, you could do it. But it's not, But what's an interesting halacha is that this concept of psik reisha is allowed to tell a guy to do it. Openly, you could tell a guy to do something which is permissible, but you're not allowed to do it because inevitably something's going to happen. For instance, I'm allowed to call in a guy. Let's say I forgot to close my refrigerator light, whatever. I can't open the door because the light's going to go on. I close the door, the light's going to go off. I'm allowed to call in a guy and ask him to please, make sure you say please open the refrigerator door. The light's going to go on. It doesn't matter. I'm telling him to open the door. Opening the door is allowed. Inevitably, the light's going to go on. That's not a problem. Tell you where you have this also a very big issue today. Years ago, hotels had keys to open the rooms. Now everything is the cards. Okay? So when you put your card into the door, a light goes on. It's electrical. So then you can't use those the key cards, they call them. You can't use those key cards in Shabbos because inevitably you're making a light. It's electrical to open the door. So what do some people do? So certain people just leave the doors a little open, whatever. But halachically, you're allowed to ask the hotel to open the door for you. Why? Because what you're telling them to do is open the door. Opening the door. That is allowed. You're asking the guy to do something permissible. Inevitably, the thing's gonna click. That doesn't matter. That's mutter. You're allowed to psikration. The classic example by this in Shulchan Aruch is very interesting. The Rebbe also brings down this din. Years ago, they didn't have like we have today stoves, with fires and the temperature. How did they heat something up? With coals. So when they wanted to heat up a pot, they would put coals at the bottom of the pot. Then would put the pot on it, and then they would put around the sides. They would put coals. Yeah, that's the way you would heat up pots. So now the shaila is, I have this pot on the fire before Shabbos. Now I want to take the pot off to get the food, to serve the cholent. The problem is when I take the pot off, the coals are going to fall down one on top of each other. And when coals fall on top of each other, they extinguish one another. So then it's malacha of Chabad, then you're extinguishing. So the said Alter brings it down. All the poskim bring this down, that you can't take off such a pot from a fire because you're causing, when you take it off, inevitably, even though you don't want the coals to fall down and extinguish, inevitably it's going to happen and therefore you're not allowed to do it. But Shulchan Aruch says, and the Alter brings this down too, you can ask a guy to take off the pot from the fire. Why? Because what am I asking the guy to do? Take a pot off the fire. That's not a problem. That's not forbidden on Shabbos. The only inevitably what's going to happen, the coals are going to fall on top of each other and extinguish them. What?
Well, that kind of scenario, is there any way to make a blech or something for coals?
Make a blech?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you cover the coals with a blech.
But you have to go over the pot.
No, but then you can't put coals all around.
Because this could be some...
This was the pot. Look, if this was the pot, they would put coals not only at the bottom, they would put coals all around, line them up on top of each other. Then when you took off the pot, the coals all fell down on top of each other. So then you're extinguishing it, and it's a secretion that you wouldn't be allowed to do.
I'm thinking that when I go in the jungles in Hawaii, I want to make a fire.
In the Amazon jungles, yeah? No, so what do you want to do? Make chong?
Yeah, I'm not going to show and eat it.
What about if you walk in someplace and they got a sensor light?
Okay, let's leave the sensors out. That's a whole different religion with the sensors. That's very complicated. And the reason why they're permitted, because it's basically no choice. So they find loopholes in the halacha. But yeah, if you're going to go in, I'll give you another example. A lot of bathrooms have this. You walk in, when you walk in, the light goes on. Now, even though you don't want the light to go on, let's see, there's enough light without it. You could still sleep without it. But you're going in, the light automatically goes on. So even though you're not turning on the light, it's happening automatically. But you can't say, I don't want the light to go in. You're going in is causing the light to go on. Therefore, from shuls, like we have it here, it's turned off for Shabbos, and therefore the sensor is off, so therefore it's turned on before Shabbos, it stays on for Shabbos. During the week you walk in, the light goes on. What do you want? Shimshon.
Oh, no, I asked this, what's the solution to answer? Go ahead.
You have no choice, you can ask a guy to do it.